Trump wants the economy to crash. And what if I told you he was trying to make it crash on purpose? In this video, I'm going to explain how Donald Trump may be trying to purposely make the economy crash by invoking tariffs. And the little known reason will surprise you, so make sure you stick to the end. Because mainly, what ends up happening is the government ends up owing trillions of dollars because there's a national deficit. So the US government owes tons of money to foreign investors, etc., because the balance sheet of America is flip-flopped. America owes more money than it's making. And the interest payments that America has on its debt is greater than its military spending budget. So if you look at somebody who owes a lot of money to like a bunch of credit card companies, the America as a country is literally the same as a human being with a balance sheet. It's just that it owes way more than it has. And so what ends up happening is countries like America end up in a death spiral by having to print more money to be able to pay off its debt. But the issue is the more money it prints, the less valuable that money is perceived as. So America has to be really smart in decreasing its debts so they can actually afford to pay it off and continue to have a world reserve currency that people trust. Since the US dollar has been removed from the gold standard in the 70s and Nixon disconnected the US dollar from gold, people could just print as much money as they want to, and it had no scarcity. And because of that, the value of the US dollar went way down compared to the value it's perceived at. And the solution and the way to get around this is to come up with fiscal policies, so policies that make sure that the US doesn't spend more money than it has. And it's been failing at this for the last 50 years. So the excitement was when Trump came up with the DOGE with Elon Musk, the hope and the excitement was for them to cut down on unnecessary government waste. And so everything is politicized. So some people say it was, Elon Musk did benefit off it by lowering government regulation so that he can advance his businesses like SpaceX. But at the same time, the hope and the idea was that it will be a good tool to reduce government waste. Tariffs have been pitched as an idea to make more money for America so that America doesn't have to deal with having all this money it can't afford and not making enough money to pay off his debts. But the logic in the tariffs have been contested at best, where, for example, America would charge a Canadian car manufacturer, or like, because most cars aren't made in America 100%. Almost nothing is made in America 100%. So what ends up happening is America ends up tariffing its own products in portions, making it hard to manufacture. For example, a car part has to like 20,000 parts, and it would have to cross the Canadian and American border multiple times before it gets assembled in America, because people are just looking to build with the cheapest, most efficient, most cost-effective and profitable things possible, rather than keep everything in America. So Trump is making foreign-built parts of cars more expensive, for example, having a 25% tariff, so that it would be too expensive to do business outside of America, so that people build in America and make more jobs for Americans. The issue is the parts may get so expensive that the auto industry is so intertwined that it will be unreasonable to really do. So with all these complexities, it's really hard to actually see the strategy, but there's a theory that Trump is actually trying to crash the economy so that it'll be able to refinance all the debt that it owes. So when the tariffs were announced at the time of the recording of this video, and they continue to get announced and announced and announced and paused and announced, the fact remains that the pauses of the tariffs show that Trump isn't really certain in terms of the tariffs he's doing, or that it's actually hurting American businesses, because as you said once, we want to make sure that the tariffs aren't hurting our own businesses. And they reached a point where people were unsure, and even his own advisors were unsure of what the tariffs are doing. So what ended up happening is he laid out all the tariffs, and the stock market crashed, the biggest crash it had since 2020. And he may be wanting to do this so that he takes people out of stock investments. So instead of people investing in stocks, it's likely that institutions are going to move their money away from stocks and into bonds, into government bonds. Because usually when people are scared, instead of them investing in stocks, which are risky and depend on business, the idea would be to invest in government bonds. Bonds are less risky. So when a lot of people invest in bonds, what ends up happening is the value of the bonds change, and the yields and what the interest rates of the bonds, the interest rates that the bonds produce actually go down. Because when the value of the bond goes up, the yield of the bond goes down. So in other words, the interest rates. So when tons of people invest in bonds, the value of the bonds go up, and then the yields and what the cash flow of the bonds go down. And when the cash flow of the bonds go down, that encourages the country to lower interest rates. So when the interest rates of the country gets lower, what ends up happening then is all the refinancing they have to do. For example, refinance, like if somebody has like a piece of property that they got a loan for 5 years, and they don't have the money to pay off the loan, but then they need to find a new lender to take over that loan after 5 years. They would have to go to another lender to replace that loan. And then this is a refinance in simple terms. The purists may come after me, but this is in simple terms. So same with the government, maybe there are trillions that it owes, and maybe there's some refinancing that will need to happen. And the idea is if you refinance all that debt that the US government has, as we spoke about earlier, then the value of those, like the amount of that interest rates, the interest rates that the refinancing happens at, it becomes way lower. And so this can save the US government hundreds of billions of dollars in interest rates, and that can make it way easier to repay back the government debt. So this is sort of a theory on why Trump is issuing tariffs. So maybe the genius isn't in what it seems like he's doing. Maybe he was just told, or maybe he was put there just to crash the economy temporarily so that he can actually get bonds funded by the public and refinance everything at lower interest rates. So what do you think of this? Is this a wacko theory because this is a theory that's grown in popularity, or is he actually doing this on purpose? Are tariffs a good idea? Are tariffs a bad idea? And what do you think? So with this, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And if you want to take advantage of the macroeconomic trends, you want to see how you can use it to raise money. If you're working on raising money, we run a company called raises.com where we help people raise over $300 million, through our systems and processes. And so if this is something that you'd like to do in the wake of this change in the economy, make sure you click below, head to raises.com and book a call.